We're at a point where we need to always be evaluating and assessing, where is the organization going, the solution that we have right now, the contract that we've had year after year that we've continued to renew. Have we done an analysis? Have we looked at the market to see, is this still the right solution, that we should have? So we have to be constantly evaluating. When I think about, like, we have a term contract and we go through the process, hey, it's time to renew. Are we looking back at past performance? Are we looking back at stakeholder feedback, user feedback to see ultimately, is this solution working? And are we looking ahead? Are we looking 1 year, 2 year ahead? Is this still the solution that we need?
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, I have the great pleasure of being joined by Shana Terry. And Shana's the CPO at Prince William County and is so passionate about public sector procurement and helping leaders grow in their careers and their lives. Shana, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Sean.
So when you think about beyond cost savings and beyond tracking, especially in public sector, what do CPOs really care about to drive success today?
Today, CPOs are really focusing on driving and delivering value for the organization. As you know, procurement plays a strategic role in helping organizations meet their organizational goals, optimizing operations, and delivering services internally and externally to communities. What I think procurement officers or chief procurement officers should focus on is really positioning procurement as a strategic partner by focusing on visionary planning, stakeholder alignment. And it's very important that we know how to tell the story of what procurement does and why we are important to the organization and why it's important to involve procurement early on in the process.
Yeah, it sure is. And I think that idea of what good looks like, of helping to create and shape and guide that vision of how do we move through all of these hard things. Now, I think that's one of those things, especially in public sector, where that compliance meets practice and meets practical. And sometimes it can feel like that's tricky to balance, but that's really what makes us leaders in the world, right? Is helping set that pace and navigating what can feel like going across a tightrope, being, having the pole pulled on both sides. And there's no net, so you just got to keep it together.
Yes. So you have your executive leadership that you're helping to support meeting organizational goals, meeting the goals of strategic plans. You have your board, your governing body, and then you have the constituents, you have the residents that you are serving. And it's mostly about, timely delivery of goods and services. But there's also the requirements that we have to follow in terms of code, procurement regulations, and our processes and procedures to ensure that we are being good stewards of taxpayer dollars and that we are meeting the law.
Yeah, and I think that sense of then making that easy for people in the organization that need to work through procurement to make something happen. This is one of those times that it gets even harder because on one hand, internally, you need to be providing great service, self-service, making it easier, faster, smoother. And then at the same time, there's often areas of ambiguity or gray space where it's not a cut and dry, clear 1 or 0 kind of an answer. And sometimes it takes the form of, hey, is this the right time to renew or retender? And those I feel like are the opportunities for leaders to shine and help their teams navigate these tricky situations.
Right. We're at a point where we need to always be evaluating and assessing, where is the organization going, the solution that we have right now, the contract that we've had year after year that we've continued to renew. Have we done an analysis? Have we looked at the market to see, is this still the right solution, that we should have? So we have to be constantly evaluating. When I think about, like, we have a term contract and we go through the process, hey, it's time to renew. Are we looking back at past performance? Are we looking back at stakeholder feedback, user feedback to see ultimately, is this solution working? And are we looking ahead? Are we looking 1 year, 2 year ahead? Is this still the solution that we need? Is there something new coming up in the market that we should be exploring? So all of those types of things we need to be evaluating instead of just doing the mundane routine. It's up for renewal. We got 3 more years. Let's continue to ride these 3 more years out. And we constantly have new suppliers coming into the market that could offer new solutions. So that's our opportunity to constantly be evaluating so that we can innovate.
And I think that innovate versus status quo is one of those pieces that makes it even trickier. Where there's a recent conversation episode where we were talking about, the difference between an RFQ that is sometimes mislabeled an RFP and how, a request for solution. And I think you've been doing some great work around helping make sure that you're creating space for new ideas, new solutions, and new ways of doing things. Can you share with the community what you're finding working there?
A little bit about, just to piggyback off of what I shared previously. So, making it an environment for our vendor community, our suppliers to exchange information and exchange ideas. So, in this world of procurement, you know, we've really evolved from only talking to vendors at the time that we have a need coming up. So starting that process early as we are thinking about what we're going to buy, what type of solution we need is, like you say, putting an RFI out with that problem statement saying, hey, here's the type of solution that I'm looking for, and having firms to respond to that. And then you could do a demo, or you could also do a pilot where you can give some of those smaller firms the opportunity to demonstrate their product, demonstrate their solution, and it allows organizations to evaluate the risk that they may be taking on prior to entering into a long-term contract.
Yeah.
I also think about, when we talked about the RFP, where, we're the reason why we did the RFP in the first place is to get a solution, but a lot of times it doesn't turn out that way. It's not written that way. It's becoming more prescriptive, where it doesn't leave room for vendors to propose a solution. So I think going back to that problem statement and this is the outcome that we are striving to achieve.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I can definitely share is I know a friend of mine started up a brilliant waste management solution. And instead of having, hundreds of trucks of contaminated soil going off to the dump to be buried, there's a cleaning and recycling component. And now it's a tiny bit that actually goes to the dump in the hazardous section. And there's a whole bunch of fresh clay, fresh gravel, etc., that's available for landscaping and whatever else needs to be done. And so there was no RFP for this, but it saved millions. And this idea that there's space for something like that, it feels like a chicken and the egg, but I bet they met somebody like you in that municipality where they were able to go and say, yeah, that is a problem. Let's go have a few conversations and let's run a pilot. And it started as a pilot, and then that turned into something really beautiful. It's good for the environment and good for taxpayers, and created a nice fresh source of some raw materials that were needed for other things. So I think there's ideas like that. And I mean, I bring a little bit of a bias around the technology end of things, but I think there's opportunities to go and look at new ideas. So thank you for leading with making space for those new things. And I really, really appreciate that. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that tightrope and how you walk that compliance and value driven decision making to help your organization and taxpayers.
So it's really understanding stakeholders, making sure that you understand your key stakeholders, what their goals are, what their priorities are for meeting their mission and their goals. And once you understand that, you can really set out to say, this is what you're trying to achieve. This is what the code or the regulations say, and finding a way to help them achieve those particular goals. So stakeholder management, stakeholder analysis is very key in walking that tight rope. So understanding what they need, why it's important to the mission, and working within the guidelines of policy and procedure to help stakeholders achieve what it is they're setting out to achieve. Um, we always like to say we never say no. We may say, no, you can't do it this way, but here's a solution for how you can do it. And that's why it's important to involve procurement at the very beginning, having procurement at the table during the planning stages, because a lot of times we can identify potential risks, we can identify mitigation strategies, we can identify solutions to ultimately help you get there, but not in a way that you may have imagined.
Yeah, there's often a labyrinth of different rules and compliance that need to be met. And having that compass with a partner in procurement can go a really, really long way. So I think one of the things I really appreciate about the way you describe that is talking about, showing up and being there and seeking to understand what they're trying to do, because you can, at that point, you can help them and you can get
Yes,
proactive, right?
yes,
And being that leader and creating the environment within your team where there's like you said, it's not no, but maybe not that way. Let's look at this way. And that's the solution oriented. Let's find the right way to go make the right thing happen. And I love that values driven centric, right? Because there's something about that sense of service, right? That purpose of being there in service of. And I know we'll all do more to help others than we ever will for ourselves. So I think that's a great way to show up. What advice, Shana, would you have for leaders in the procurement, the supply chain space?
so one thing that my team started doing recently to really connect the work that procurement does to the broader organization and to those that we serve is we started to have these mission moments in our meetings where team members could share a procurement that they're working on and how that procurement connects to the organization's broader mission. So we have procurement officers that maybe managed a procurement for our new homeless navigation center and seeing how they were able to help shape the selection of the construction contractor that is now going to build a homeless navigation center that is going to serve our homeless population. So the more that we can connect what we do to the organization's broader purpose, that fuels really the public service. That's why I love procurement so much and public service procurement, because you're not on the front lines, but you help provide the solution that could one day save somebody's life, improve their life. So that's why I really love procurement. So, what I would advise procurement leaders is to make sure that you are working with your team to help them connect the work that they do to the broader mission. Every chance you get, talk about the value of procurement, the value that procurement drives in helping organizations meet their strategic goals and improve quality of life and well-being in communities.
There's that underlying sense of service, right? When you see and understand the difference that you're making. And I talk all the time about the never-ending climb, leaving the world better than we found it. And when you can connect those dots and you understand that, going through this process, whichever way you want to say it, takes on the other side of that is something that does leave the world better. There's something really beautiful about that. And there's a sense of service. And I've found, Shana, I would just imagine you've seen the same thing. It takes a special type to navigate public sector procurement well.
Yes,
And I think that sense of why we do what we do, it fuels us because it creates that why we get up in the morning.
yes.
And if you lose that, right, that's probably the biggest risk. And so finding that way to keep that connection and keep building that connection for those in our teams, it's powerful stuff. Shana, thank you so much for joining us today. I really
Thank you for
appreciate you.
having me, Sean.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And for all of you watching, this has been another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. We'll see you next week.